and I was asked to join the art club and... Oh, wait a minute, I think someone's here. Hi, I'm Emily. You're probably watching this because someone in your family has hemophilia. Someone in mine does, and my mom told me I might be a carrier of hemophilia. I'm talking to my cousin Jenny. She's a carrier and is studying to be a doctor. She's going to explain all about being a carrier. She knows a lot about it. Say hi, Jenny.
Hi there. So, Emily, got your questions ready for me?
Yep, but before we start, I have this book that you sent me called All About Carriers. Do I need it now?
No, but a lot of what we're going to talk about you'll find in this book. Think of it as the Carrier Encyclopedia. And just for those of you who are watching, you can find this book by clicking on the button.
Okay, Jenny. Here's my first question. What exactly is a carrier?
Well, when you're talking about hemophilia, a carrier means a girl who has a problem with one of her genes.
Hey, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with my genes. I love these genes.
Not the genes you wear. Those are spelled J-E-A-N-S. I'm talking about the genes that make up your body, G-E-N-E-S.
Oh, okay. You had me worried. I've heard about them, but what does hemophilia have to do with those kinds of genes?
I guess I need to explain a few basic things, like what genes are.
I'm listening.
Okay, I'll start with how our bodies are made. I'm sure you've heard about cells in your science class. Our bodies are made up of about 10 trillion cells. You need a very powerful microscope to see just one cell. Each cell is about 1/10 the thickness of a strand of hair. There might be 30,000 cells just in your big toe. Each one of these cells contains something called chromosomes.
Chromo what?
Chromosomes. C-H-R-O-M-O-S-O-M-E-S. Each chromosome is made up of genes.
And these aren't the genes I wear.
You're right. These genes contain all the information that decides how you look and how your body works. There's no end to the combinations the genes can make. That's why we all look different. Some genes decide what kind of hair you'll have. Others decide the color of your eyes. And others what your skin color will be.
Wow, this is pretty complicated stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing how the body works.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Our bodies are made up of cells, the cells are made up of chromosomes, and the chromosomes are made up of genes?
That's right. You've got it.
I think I kind of understand. But what does this have to do with hemophilia and being a carrier?
I think I should explain a bit about how blood clotting works and about hemophilia before we get into how you become a carrier.
Okay, I'll just get comfortable then.
And don't forget to ask me questions if you don't understand something, Emily.
Yep, I'm ready.
Hemophilia is a genetic disorder. This means that one of the genes that a person inherits doesn't work properly. In the case of hemophilia, the body is missing something that makes blood clot properly.
Clot means that the bleeding stops, right?
Yep, blood is carried through the body by a network of blood vessels called veins, arteries, and capillaries. If one of the blood vessels is injured or cut, blood may leak through the hole in the vessel wall. They can break near the surface, like a cut, or even deeper inside the body and cause a bruise or an internal hemorrhage.
What's a hemorrhage?
It's when the blood continues to leak out of a blood vessel. Clotting or coagulation is the process that stops the blood from leaking out of the blood vessels. As soon as a vessel wall breaks, there are different proteins that gather together to form a plug, kind of a scab. Then the vessel can heal. You need many different proteins to form this plug, including the ones called factor 8 and factor 9. If one of them is missing, the cut may continue to bleed for a long time. A person missing either factor 8 or factor 9 has hemophilia. You know what, Emily? I found this awesome video to explain everything. Let's watch it together.
Normally, When clotting works properly, the factors act together to stop the bleeding quickly. When boys with hemophilia bleed, one of their clotting factors, 8, which is more common, or 9, is low or missing. The factors cannot work together and the bleeding continues. The most serious bleeds occur in confined spaces. Blood and fluid flood the area, which then begins to swell. The swelling causes pressure and can lead to pain and possibly permanent damage. Bleeds are effectively treated by infusing the missing factor through a vein. If the family has been trained, this can easily be done at home. Once the factor is infused, the clotting sequence is activated and the bleeding stops.
In our family, some people have a problem with the factor 8 gene. My dad has almost no factor 8 in his blood, so he has severe hemophilia, and I inherited that abnormal factor 8 gene. That's why I'm a carrier.
But why was I told I could be a carrier? My dad doesn't have hemophilia.
There are 2 ways to inherit the hemophilia gene. If your father has hemophilia, you're automatically a carrier. It's called being an obligate carrier, just like me and my sister Sarah. Or if a mother is a carrier, her sons will have a 50% chance of having hemophilia and her daughters will have a 50% chance of being carriers. They'll be called possible carriers.
Wait a second. Is my mom a carrier? Is that why I might be a carrier?
Before I answer that, we need to talk about genetics and inheritance.
Genetics. I bet that has something to do with genes and chromosomes and all the stuff we've been talking about, right?
You're right. Every cell contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, meaning 46 chromosomes in all. There are specific chromosomes that decide what sex a baby will be. These are the X and the Y chromosomes, or simply the sex chromosomes. Girls have 2 X chromosomes and boys have 1 X and 1 Y. You automatically inherit an X chromosome from your mom. Now, if you also inherit the X chromosome from your dad, you're a girl. But if you inherit the Y chromosome from him, you're a boy. The gene affecting how your blood clots is on an X chromosome. In my case, my father's X chromosome has the abnormal gene that causes factor 8 hemophilia. Because Sarah and I automatically inherited that X chromosome, we're obligate carriers. My brothers got a normal X chromosome from mom and the Y chromosome from our dad. Since there's no problem with that one, they didn't inherit hemophilia at all.
I still don't understand that 50% chance.
Here's how it works. In this second illustration, one of the mother's X chromosomes has the hemophilia gene, so she's a carrier. You remember that a child will get one of the mother's 2 X chromosomes. If she's a carrier, the child has 1 chance out of 2 of getting the abnormal gene, or 50%. You can see that one of these daughters inherited it, so she's a carrier. And one of the sons also inherited the abnormal gene, so he has hemophilia. The other 2 kids got their mother's unaffected X chromosome. So, each time a carrier has a baby, there's a 50% chance that this child will inherit the hemophilia gene.
So, all those 4 kids could have been affected?
That's right, or none of them could have been.
I think it's starting to make some sense, but how do I fit in here?
Let's look at our family tree. It'll make it easier to understand how you're a possible carrier. So this is our family tree. We know that great-grandma Flora and great-grandpa George had 1 son with hemophilia, 1 son without hemophilia, and 2 daughters. One daughter, our grandma Anne, had a boy with hemophilia, my dad John, which means she was a carrier. Here you can see how Sarah and I both inherited the hemophilia gene, and my brothers didn't. Grandma Ann also had 2 daughters, your mom and Aunt Julia. This is where you come in. Since neither your mom nor Aunt Julia have had any boys with hemophilia, we don't know if they inherited the gene. And if they did, we don't know if they passed it on to you or your sister or to our cousin Katie.
So, like, Laura, Katie, and I might be carriers of hemophilia.
Exactly. And your mom and Aunt Julia as well.
So, then you're an obligate carrier and I'm a possible carrier?
That's right.
So you could have a boy with hemophilia, but I don't know if I could.
That's right. The only way to find out if you have the gene for hemophilia is to be tested.
A test? Does it hurt?
Nah, it's no big deal. There are different types of tests you can have, but you need to talk to your parents and your doctor before you have them. Unless you're planning on having a baby soon.
Oh, no way.
Then you don't need to know right now. But you might want to get your factor levels tested just in case you hurt yourself badly or if you need an operation, like having your tonsils out.
What's a factor level?
It's the amount of the factor 8 or factor 9 protein that the X chromosome can produce to make your blood clot. There are different degrees of hemophilia, severe, moderate, and mild. People bleed differently depending on how much of the clotting factor their bodies produce, or rather don't produce.
How's the bleeding stopped?
Hemophiliacs use a product called factor concentrate. It contains the factor 8 or factor 9 that their body doesn't make.
Are these the needles I've seen your dad using?
Yep. Hemophiliacs inject the factor concentrate into a vein so that it will begin to work right away and stop the bleeding. They learn how to do this when they're very young so that they don't have to go to the hospital all the time to get it done by a nurse. Often they have these infusions 2 or 3 times a week just to prevent bleeds from starting in the first place.
I could never do that.
You would if you had to. If a severe hemophiliac doesn't get treated when he has a bleed, he'd be in a lot of pain. His joints could become damaged, and if he had a bad accident, he could even die.
Can girls who are carriers have severe hemophilia?
It's very, very rare for a girl who's a carrier to have severe hemophilia because she inherits one normal X chromosome and one abnormal X chromosome. The normal one is usually enough to protect her from having serious problems with bleeding. But about 1 in 4 carriers has low factor 8 or factor 9 levels, and some of them do have problems with bleeding.
How do you find out if your factor levels are low?
You have to get a blood test.
Is that the same test that would tell me if I'm a carrier or not?
No, it's not. When you're older, you can have a different blood test to see if you have the gene that carries hemophilia. It's called DNA testing.
Do you have low factor levels, Jenny?
Yeah, I do. Mine are quite low for a carrier, about 15% of the normal level of factor 8.
So, do you have problems with bleeding?
Yeah, I can only tell you how it affects me. Everyone is different. Some carriers don't have any problems. Those who do are referred to as symptomatic carriers. In my case, I've always had a lot of bruises. If I bump my arm, I get a big purple bruise, and I mean big. Sometimes it can take a long time to go away, but first it gets green and then yellow.
Ew!
Well, I'm used to it now. They don't hurt much, but sometimes when I was younger, especially when I was wearing a bathing suit, I tried to hide them. But most of the time, I'd show my friends the really big ones. They were very impressed. I also had nosebleeds when I was a kid. Lots of kids do, but if you have a bleeding disorder like hemophilia, you might bleed for a longer time. Sometimes people would freak out when they saw all the blood. But I learned how to take care of nosebleeds, so they weren't so bad. I don't get them very often anymore.
When you cut yourself, do you bleed a lot?
I don't bleed more than anyone else. I bleed for a bit longer though. I just put a clean cloth on the cut and press on it for 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes it bleeds a bit on and off for a day or so, but usually not much more than that. But once, I had to get a tooth pulled and it bled for 2 days.
2 days? What did you do?
I called up my hematologist.
You're a hematologist?
Doctors who take care of people with hemophilia are called hematologists. Hema is the Greek word for blood. So I called my hematologist and she gave me some medication that helps make a scab so that the blood wouldn't keep on oozing out.
Did you have to get a needle like Uncle John?
No, it was just pills. Now I take them ahead of time if I'm going for dental work, and I told my dentist that I have a bleeding disorder.
What would happen if you broke your arm or had to have your appendix out or something?
In that case, I might need to use a different product that is given with a needle. And for really serious situations, I could even need factor concentrate like my dad.
I would not want to get a needle.
It's not as bad as it sounds, and if I kept bleeding after an operation, it would hurt a lot more than just one needle.
I guess so. Do you have any other problems because you're a carrier?
Well, there's actually one problem that can affect your life almost every month.
What's that?
Symptomatic carriers often have menstrual periods that are longer and heavier than other girls. Sometimes you lose so much blood, it can make you anemic, which means you feel extremely tired all the time.
But how would I know if I'm bleeding more than other girls?
That's a very good question, and it's not easy to answer. But there are some signs that you can look for. Your periods should last for about 5 to 6 days, once every 28 days. Some carriers have periods that last 10 days or longer, and they can have them more than once a month. For the first year or so, your periods can be especially heavy. That's because there are certain chemicals in the blood called hormones that make periods happen. The body produces a lot of these hormones in order to start periods. But if your periods are very heavy and there's a possibility that you're a carrier, you should talk to your mom or family doctor about it. To help keep track of how much blood you lose, there's a chart you can fill out. In fact, your doctor might ask you to fill it in for a few months, just to see whether or not you're bleeding heavily or for too long. Heavy or prolonged bleeding from periods is called menorrhagia.
Do all carriers have these problems?
No, some do. Others have periods like everyone else. But having problems like this every month can affect your social life. When I was a teenager, I had to change my pads every hour because they'd be soaked with blood. When that happened, the blood would start to stain through my clothes, so I always wore dark pants or skirts. It was so gross. And to make it worse, it was embarrassing to have to ask permission to leave the classroom so often. So sometimes I just sat and waited for everyone to leave before I left the room. I'd always have a sweater so I could wrap it around my waist, just in case. You know what, Emily? If you have heavy periods, here's some advice from your big cousin. I found that pads work better than tampons. With the pads, I've had fewer accidents to be embarrassed about. Also, if you have cramps and you want to take something to help with the pain, you should never take aspirin or any anti-inflammatory pills like Motrin or Advil or even some of the Midol products. Tylenol's okay, but you should definitely check with your doctor to see what kind of pain reliever is safe for you. When I had my period, or if there was any chance of it starting, I wouldn't go to a sleepover, a party, or especially a dance. It was so frustrating. But then my doctor told me about treatment and products that could help. She suggested I go on birth control pills so that I'd bleed less.
No way, my parents would totally freak out.
No, they wouldn't. They'd understand that it would only be to help control your heavy periods.
What else can you do?
The most important thing is to see the medical team at a hemophilia treatment center. They'll tell you all about other treatments that can help.
I hope I'm not a carrier. It sounds horrible.
It's not that bad, and don't forget that not all carriers have problems with bleeding.
Yeah, okay. But if I turn out to be a carrier and I have problems with bleeding, then what about stuff like sports, school outings, piercing, tattoos, phys ed class, hot tubs, massages, or boyfriends?
Whoa, slow down. One thing at a time. If you're a symptomatic carrier, you can practice almost any sport you want except maybe contact or risky sports like hockey or competitive snowboarding. Just use your head and wear protective equipment, just like everybody should. Now, as for school outings and sleepovers, you just need to be prepared in case your period starts and bring along the proper pads and medication you might need. With piercings, you should speak to your doctor to see if it's safe for you. It all depends on the kind you're getting. Your ears are basically cartilage, so there isn't much blood there. But places like your lip or your belly button might bleed a lot. Again, for tattoos, you should definitely speak to your doctor about it. But you also may want to talk to your parents. They might not be too thrilled about the idea. What were the other things?
Phys ed, hot tubs, massages, and boyfriends.
Phys ed class, no problem. Nothing stops you from being active like everyone else. In fact, exercise will keep your muscles strong and help you avoid problems. Hot tubs and massages are a great way to relax, but before you get a massage, it's always good to explain your bleeding problem to the therapist so she'll adapt her technique to make sure you don't get bruises from the massage. Now, about your boyfriend question, you're no different from any other girl. But if you have problems with your periods, you might have to stay home sometimes and miss a party or a dance. It's up to you to decide if you want to tell your boyfriend the real reason for it. Why? Do you have someone in mind?
I might. If I turn out to be a carrier, then I don't know that I'd want to tell anyone about it, because it's sort of like embarrassing, isn't it?
There is nothing to be embarrassed about. Don't ever forget that it's the gene that's not normal, not you. You are absolutely normal. Emily, I know this might have been a lot of info and there's a lot more we could talk about, but don't worry, everything will be okay. And don't forget, you can find a lot of the answers in that book we talked about earlier, all about carriers. Plus, there's this super cool button called Fun Facts on the menu that can tell you about a lot of stuff. But being a carrier doesn't just mean problems, you know.
It doesn't?
No, there are some bonuses. First of all, you get to go to the hemophilia summer camp and meet other kids who have bleeding disorders. I always had a great time and made some good friends there. Your family also gets to go to family weekends, picnics, and other activities organized by your local hemophilia chapter. There are even special activities just for young people your age.
That'd be fun.
Do you have to do volunteer work to get school credits?
Yeah, we do at my school.
Well, you get lots of chances to volunteer with the Hemophilia Society. Sometimes you can be a camp counselor, or you can help out at fundraising activities.
That sounds really cool, especially that part about being a camp counselor.
And you know, I even got a scholarship from the Canadian Hemophilia Society to help pay for my university. And if it hadn't been for hemophilia, I might never have gotten interested in medicine. Next year, I'll be Dr. Jenny to you.
Oh, excuse me. What about having babies, Jenny? Not that I want one now.
There's no reason you can't have kids if you're a carrier. Of course, when you're ready, you'll have to talk to your doctor at your treatment center since there are certain precautions to take to make sure both you and the baby are fine. You heard about the chances of having a baby with hemophilia if you're a carrier. It's 1 chance out of 2 for a boy, 1 chance out of 2 for a girl to inherit the gene. And the baby may not inherit the gene at all.
Is there a cure for hemophilia?
No, not yet. Right now, scientists are working on ways to improve treatment and to cure hemophilia by changing a person's genes. It's called gene therapy, but this is very complicated and it might not happen for a while.
Well, I don't need to worry about that right now anyways.
No, you don't. It's just good for you to have this information now. Well, that's about all I can think of. Do you have any more questions?
Not really, but I can call you if I think of something, right?
Sure. You can also check out the Canadian Hemophilia Society website at hemophilia.ca or call up someone at your local chapter. Their number's on the CHS website.
Well, thanks for the info, Jenny. You're awesome. I guess I'll see you in 2 weeks for Grandpa's birthday.
Yep, I'll be there. See you then, Emily. Bye.
Bye. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to have to think about all this and check out that hemophilia website Jenny told me about. But not right now. I need a break from all this total brain overload. But if you have any questions, or you just want to review anything Jenny and I talked about, you should click on the menu buttons. You can find the coolest quiz ever. Oh, and check out that fun facts page Jenny told us about. See ya!